Hello, my name is Azra. I came home in the rain to check on my grandfather. He's paralyzed. What I found was blood and silence. He'd been lying there for hours, alone, forgotten. They told me not to come, said he was resting, said I was overreacting, again. But when I saw my face scratched out of the family photo, when I found the fake signature on a deed that was never his idea, I realized they hadn't just pushed me out, they were erasing us both. Why would your own family lie like that? And what do you do when the people you trust most quietly bury you while you're still breathing? The rain hadn't let up since I crossed the Pierce County line. Thick droplets clung to my windshield, blurred everything in streaks, road signs, brake lights, the outline of that worn-out exit toward Tacoma. For a moment, I hesitated, foot hovering over the gas. Part of me wanted to keep driving, past the bluff, past the weight of all that silence, but I turned anyway. Because even if no one had asked me to come back, especially not Vera, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, the kind of wrong that settles into your chest before your brain can catch up. Vera's voice still played in my head. That message from last week, "Don't bother coming." He sleeps most of the day. Short, clipped, just enough to sound like concern if you didn't know her tone. But I did. That wasn't worry. That was dismissal. The house sat at the end of a gravel road lined with maple trees, their leaves gone gold and red, scattered now in muddy puddles. The porch light was flickering, more like a weak pulse than a glow. My stomach tightened. I pulled the key from the ignition, letting the rain hit the roof for a beat before I stepped out. The cold bit through my jacket. It was quieter than I remembered. No wind chimes, no TV hum seeping through the windows, just rain. When I reached the door, I froze. It was open, not wide, just cracked. Enough to see the darkness inside. I pushed it gently. It creaked. "Grandpa?" I called out, instinctively soft. No answer. "Grandpa, it's Azra. My voice caught. The smell hit me first. Stale air, metal, and something else. Wrong. The hallway light was off. No footsteps. No shuffle of his wheelchair. Just the quiet that comes when a place has been empty too long. I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath my boots, and I shut the door behind me, more to keep the cold out than anything else. My fingers found the wall switch. Nothing. The bulb must have blown. I took a few cautious steps toward the kitchen, calling out again. "Grandpa?" The sound of my voice felt too loud, like I was intruding in my own childhood home. That's when I slipped. One heel skidded across something slick. I stumbled, hands hitting the wall, the floor, wet. I looked down. My fingers glistened red in the dim hallway light. Blood. "God!" I choked, scrambling forward. "Grandpa!" He was slumped against the wall near the bathroom. His head rested awkwardly to one side, eyes partially open, lips parted. A smear of blood led from the edge of the tile toward his wheelchair, overturned a few feet away. "Grandpa, can you hear me? Grandpa!" My voice cracked as I dropped beside him, careful not to move him. One of his hands twitched, barely. I pulled out my phone, fingers shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. 911, what's your emergency? My grandfather, he fell. He's bleeding. I think he hit his head. He's paralyzed. Please send someone." The dispatcher kept me on the line, guiding me through basic checks, but my brain felt distant, like I was observing the moment instead of living it. Her voice was calm. Mine wasn't. "He's breathing, but I don't know how long he's been like this. Is anyone else home with you?" "No, just me." "Help was coming," she said. "Stay on the line." But I couldn't speak anymore. I just crouched there, pressing my jacket gently to the side of his head, trying not to cry, trying not to think. I remembered sitting with him on that same floor when I was 7, playing chess. He used to let me win, until I got smart enough to know he was letting me. He used to say, "The world's loud, Azra. Listen harder for the quiet parts." I was listening now. I stayed beside him until I heard the ambulance siren rise in the distance. Then closer. Red and blue lights bounced across the porch window. Someone pounded on the door. "In here!" I shouted. Two EMTs burst in, their efficiency jarring against the stillness I'd just been trapped in. They moved fast, questions, vitals, lifting him gently. "Do you know what time this happened?" one of them asked. I looked at the microwave clock in the kitchen. 5:41 p.m. I'd arrived just before 5:30. "I don't know," I admitted. "I found him like this." One of them nodded, writing it down. As they wheeled him out, I followed to the porch. Rain had picked up again, running in tiny rivers off the edge of the roof. I didn't move. The EMT paused. "You coming with us?" "I'll drive behind," I said quietly. He nodded and disappeared into the vehicle. The doors shut with a heavy thud. I watched them pull away, the taillights fading into the fog. Then I was alone again. No sirens, no voices, just the rain, and the question that kept pulsing louder than my heartbeat. Why was he alone? I didn't follow the ambulance right away. Instead, I stood there on the porch, the wooden slats slick with rain, breathing in the smell of wet pine and copper. My hands still shook, though whether from the cold or the shock, I couldn't tell. Only after the taillights disappeared around the bend did I finally move, slipping back inside just long enough to grab my bag and keys. The kitchen clock blinked 5:47 p.m. I'd only been there minutes. But time had a cruel way of dragging when you were afraid. St. Joseph's ER was 15 minutes away, but I drove slower than I needed to, watching the road through the blur of wipers and questions. Why was the house so quiet? Why was he alone? I pulled into the lot a little after 6. The rain hadn't let up. It turned the parking lot into a shallow mirror, reflecting the red emergency sign above the entrance. I left the engine running long enough to catch my breath. My palms were damp. My sleeves stained a dull red that no amount of rain could rinse clean. Inside, the hospital was warm but sterile. Bleach, latex, faint antiseptic. The nurse at reception gave me a tight nod and handed me a form, then pointed to the waiting area. The clock above her desk read 7:12. I sat. My coat clung to me. My hair curled against my cheeks, still damp. Across the room, a young man tapped nervously on his knee, and a woman in scrubs dozed against the arm of a vinyl chair. Time ticked by, no updates. That's when I noticed it again, on my hand. The blood. Dried now, rusty, clinging to the curve between my thumb and forefinger. I stared at it, remembering the way Grandpa's head had rested against the wall, the way his lips had moved but no sound came out. The last time he'd looked at me like that, I was 10. I'd gotten lost during a field trip to the state park. When they finally found me, crying beneath a tree, he'd hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would snap. "Azra," he'd whispered, "you're my compass." Back then, I thought it was just something he said to calm me down. Now it echoed like a prophecy. "Azra Whitlow?" a voice interrupted. I stood, almost too quickly. The doctor, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too many families fall apart in this hallway, motioned for me to follow. We walked past drawn curtains and quiet machines until we stopped at a small room. Inside, Grandpa was hooked to monitors, a bandage around his head, tubes in his arms. He looked even smaller than I remembered, like time had whittled him down. "He's stable," the doctor said, "but there's more." I turned to him, heart in my throat. Based on the drying pattern of the blood and the pressure sores we found, we estimate he'd been on that floor for about 5 hours before you found him. My knees went weak. I gripped the back of a nearby chair. 5 hours? I echoed. That's impossible. I'm sorry, but the condition of the wounds and his dehydration tell us he was down since at least midday. I shook my head, as if the act could rewind the truth. "No," I said, voice hollow. "My sister, she lives here. Vera. She said he was fine." The doctor's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes. Not judgment, just weariness. "He's lucky you came when you did." That phrase followed me down the hallway as I left the room. Lucky. Grandpa wasn't lucky. He'd been abandoned. I stepped outside for air and pulled out my phone, hands still trembling. Vera's number blinked on the screen. She picked up on the third ring. What now? She snapped. What now? I repeated, voice icy. He was on the floor since noon, Vera. A pause, just long enough to feel rehearsed. I was busy. I told you not to come, didn't I? This is exactly why you always make a mess out of everything. My fingers curled tightly around the phone. He could have died. But he didn't, she said flatly. So stop acting like a saint for showing up once in 5 years. That one hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I hung up before she could say more. I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. By the time I got back to the house, the sky had darkened into a heavy blue. Rain still dripped from the porch gutters. Inside, everything was as I'd left it, still, heavy, waiting. I set my bag down in the kitchen and turned toward the hallway. Something about the silence was too sharp, like it had been cleaned too perfectly. I moved to the bookshelf where Grandpa kept his old files and looked for the security system monitor. The screen was flashing red. I pressed a few buttons. The system rebooted. Playback started. 10:12 a.m. Normal. 12:47 p.m. Nothing. 3:13 p.m. Freeze. The screen jumped. Blank. The timestamp vanished. DVR disconnected. I checked the back. The cable had been pulled. I'd arrived at 3:30. Whoever did this knew when I was coming. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering like it had its own secret to spill. Then I saw it, on the wall across the hall, where Grandpa had once hung our family portrait. A new frame, same picture. But something was wrong. I stepped closer. My face had been scratched out. Not torn, not removed. Scratched, angrily, deeply, over and over. I stared at it for a long time. Someone hadn't just wanted me gone. They wanted me erased. I stayed in the hallway for longer than I should have, the scratched photograph still burning into me. My eyes darted between each face, frozen in time. Vera with her polished grin, my mother with that tired look she'd perfected over the years, Grandpa with one arm around me, the other resting on the back of the chair. But there was a brutal absence now. My face had been sliced clean through, over and over, like someone was trying to delete me with dull scissors. That photo used to hang above Grandpa's reading chair in the den. It had been taken at a family barbecue, before things fell apart, before I started saying no to things that made me small, before I stopped calling just to be ignored. This wasn't just some childish tantrum or mindless spite. This was intentional. I held the frame for a moment, my breath uneven. The glass was cool, but the rage beneath my skin was volcanic. Not loud, just heavy, measured. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just set the photo down carefully on the hallway table and walked to my old room. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. I hadn't been in there since, maybe 3 years? Maybe more. Not since I'd left Tacoma for good, dragging a single suitcase behind me like that's all it took to unhook myself from this place. The door creaked open. The room looked exactly the same, at first. Same faded lilac walls, same twin bed with the creaky frame, same bookshelf packed with old paperbacks and high school trophies no one had cared to dust. But the more I looked, the more I noticed what was missing. The top drawer of my desk had been emptied. My favorite books, dog-eared, note-stuffed, were gone. The framed photo of Grandpa and me fishing at Brown's Point was no longer on the shelf. I stood there, taking slow steps like I was walking through someone else's memory of me. Then I saw the cardboard box in the hallway, marked in black Sharpie, AZ, junk. It wasn't even in my room, just set outside the door, like garbage. I crouched and opened it. Inside, a stack of dusty things I hadn't realized I'd left behind. A bent certificate from college, Dean's list, a stuffed bear missing an eye, a birthday card from Grandpa with his crooked handwriting. To my favorite girl, don't let the world turn you into stone. At the bottom of the pile was a Polaroid. Me and Grandpa on the porch, both of us in flannel, mugs of cocoa in hand. Someone had taped it back together after it had torn. They meant to remove me long before today, I whispered. Not just physically, emotionally, culturally. Like I was some relic from a branch of the family they'd rather forget. I sat on the edge of the bed, the box beside me. The room felt too quiet, like it was listening. I stared at the ceiling. I remembered texting Vera last weekend, asking if I could stop by. She'd replied late that evening. He's been sleeping all day. Best not. And then, a few hours later, a voicemail from my mother. Azra, honey, just let him rest. He gets overwhelmed so easily now, and it's just been hard. So I didn't go. I believed them. Or maybe I wanted to believe them. Wanted to think they were finally doing what I couldn't, taking care of him, being there. And all the while, they were sorting through my things like I was already dead to them. I got up, walked back into the hallway. The lights flickered as I passed, the old wiring acting up again. Funny how some things in this house hadn't changed at all. I turned into the kitchen, the place where most of the family drama had unfolded over the years. The table still had the same ugly floral tablecloth, stained with coffee rings and candle wax. The chair at the end, the one Grandpa used to sit in, was empty. A memory flashed, me at 16, yelling at Vera for cutting me off during a conversation about college. Grandpa had been quiet the whole time, sipping his tea. Then, after she stormed out, he leaned over and said, "You speak like your words matter. Don't stop." I didn't, but they stopped listening. I walked over to the kitchen window, arms crossed. Rain dotted the glass in lazy drops now. The storm had started to fade. My phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. From Vera. I didn't need to listen to know the tone, but I played it anyway. "Can we not start drama again? This isn't about you, Azra. Just don't make this harder than it already is." Harder for who? For her. For the version of our family she'd molded and maintained while conveniently cutting out anyone who didn't play along? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing for a moment. Then I reached for a pen. Not to write back, but to draw a line in my own mind. They erased me from the family, but they won't erase him. Not the man who taught me how to make oatmeal just right. Not the one who held me when my first pet died. Not the one who stayed up late reading philosophy books with me, even though his eyes were going. No. He deserved more than silence, more than being left to bleed on a cold floor while everyone around him measured inconvenience. The light flickered again. A chill spread through the room. I stood, box in hand, and carried it back to my room, placing it gently in the closet. One day, I'd throw it out myself. But not yet. The screen went dark as the voicemail ended, and I just sat there, still at the kitchen table, the same one where Grandpa used to sneak me extra cookies when no one was looking. Now, I was staring at a screen like it was capable of biting back. Vera's voice, sharp and smug, echoed louder than it had any right to. "Can we not start drama again?" It wasn't a request. It was a line in the sand. I slid the phone aside and leaned back, letting the back legs of the chair creak a little. The wind outside scraped tree branches against the house like knuckles dragging down siding. Even the storm sounded tired. My thumb hovered over the call button for Vera. I knew better. I knew how this would go. But I hit dial anyway. She picked up faster than I expected. "You're really going to do this now?" she snapped. I didn't bother greeting her. "The doctor said Grandpa had been on the floor for 5 hours, Vera. 5. That's not a nap. That's not he was tired. That's abandonment." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Here we go with the hero act." My jaw tensed. "Excuse me? You always do this," she continued. "Swoop in when it's convenient, throw accusations, then disappear again. You're not the only one who loves him, Azra." I stood, pacing slowly toward the hallway, phone to my ear. "Then where were you? Where was your love when he was lying in his own blood?" "You have no idea what's been going on," she hissed. "You left. You chose to stay away." "I was pushed out," I said, biting the words. "You all made it clear I wasn't needed. That I was too emotional, too much of a problem." "You're here now because you want to feel important," she snapped. "You're not helping. You're making this worse." That did it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just ended the call, walked straight into the hallway, and stood under the photo with my face scratched out again. I let the silence around me grow heavy, like it needed to land before I could speak. "She thinks I need to be seen," I whispered, not to anyone. She never realized I was never invisible. I was just ignored. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside broke the quiet. I glanced out the window and saw headlights pull into the driveway, Clarice. I should have been surprised, but something in me already knew she'd come. By the time she knocked, lightly, like she didn't want to commit to the sound, I had already opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered. Same hairstyle, same nervous hands, same habit of glancing everywhere but at me. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice thin. I stepped aside. "Come in." We didn't speak as she took off her coat and settled into one of the kitchen chairs. I followed, sat across from her. The distance between us felt heavier than it looked. "I saw your message," she said softly. I didn't respond. She ran a hand along the rim of her mug like it gave her permission to talk. I heard him crying." The words hit harder than anything Vera had said. "When?" I asked. "The day it happened," she said. "I was in the guest room. I'd just finished folding towels. I heard him calling for help. Not loudly, but enough. And She stopped. I waited. "Vera told me not to worry," she whispered. "Said he'd probably just dropped the remote again, that he hated being hovered over." "And you believed her?" I asked. Clarice swallowed. "I didn't want to cause more mess." I sat back in the chair, heart pounding in a dull rhythm. "You didn't want to make it messy," I repeated. "So you ignored a man calling for help, your father." You didn't mean for him to bleed on the floor for 5 hours?" I snapped. "You didn't mean to stay quiet while Vera lied to me, told me not to come?" Clarice's eyes welled. I didn't know how to stand up to her. That's when it broke. "You didn't say anything. All these years, you let them pretend I was gone. You let them label me the problem, the rebel, the drama queen. You nodded along, even when it killed me." "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of the arguments, afraid of losing what little peace we had left." "Peace built on silence isn't peace," I said. "It's submission." She didn't argue. "I needed you," I continued. "Back then, when Vera made me feel small, when Grandpa was the only one who listened." Clarice's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Azra. I truly am." I looked at her, really looked. For a moment, I saw the woman who used to sing to me when I was sick, the one who brought me soup when I flunked my first chemistry quiz. But I also saw the woman who stood behind Vera in every family photo, in every fight, in every silence that cut me deeper than words. "This ends here," I said. "I'm going to find out the truth. And if it hurts her reputation, so be it." Clarice lowered her head. "You always were the brave one." I didn't reply. I walked past her, toward Grandpa's study. The key was still where it always had been, tucked inside the spine of his old dictionary. I opened the drawer slowly, like it might burn. Inside was a single envelope, written in his handwriting, "Only if she comes back." I stood there, holding it, heart hammering again. Not from fear, from knowing. The envelope weighed nothing, but it shook everything. I didn't open the envelope right away. For a while, I just stood there in Grandpa's study, staring at it. And the edges were slightly frayed, the ink faded, but his handwriting, stubborn and distinctive, was unmistakable. "Only if she comes back." Those 5 words made the air heavier. I finally sat down at the desk, cleared a spot between stacks of yellowed notebooks and old newspaper clippings, and broke the seal. Inside was a single photocopy. A property transfer form. Pre-filled. My grandfather's name typed at the top. Vera's listed under recipient. It was unsigned, but someone had attempted to trace his name in pen, awkwardly, unconvincingly. The signature line was indented, as though the pen had paused long before pressing down. There was a sticky note stuck to the corner. In Grandpa's shaky script, "Do not sign this. She will try again." I set it aside, breath locked tight in my lungs. Across the room, his filing cabinet stood slightly ajar. I opened it and rifled through until I found what I was looking for. Birthday cards. Dozens, maybe hundreds. one from every year. I pulled mine from last year, the one where he'd written in red pen because his blue ink had run out. The signature was careful, slightly crooked, but real. I laid the two side by side, the card and the transfer form. The forged one wasn't even close. They'd tried to copy his name like a child mimicking cursive. I took out my phone, opened the camera, and started recording. I narrated every detail. The photocopy, the note, the real card. I didn't know if I'd need this later, but I wanted the truth documented. If Vera wanted to play games, she'd have to do it in the light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my old room, watching shadows move across the ceiling as branches tapped the window in slow, rhythmic patterns. The wind had shifted, less storm, more restlessness. Somewhere around 4 a.m., I gave up trying and padded barefoot into the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee and sat at the table, listening to it brew like it might offer advice. The house was quiet, too quiet. At 5:12, my phone buzzed. I thought it was Vera again, ready for round 2. But it wasn't a call. It was a notification. My old phone, which I'd left charging in the corner, had synced with the house Wi-Fi, and with that connection came something else, access to the old family group chat. I hadn't looked at it in years. Curiosity, no, something uglier, made me pick it up. The last few messages were from yesterday. Vera, guess who's finally back in town? A cousin I barely remembered. Let me guess, Azra the martyr? Another cousin laughing. She's back to make a scene. Always wants a cut of the pity. Then someone else. Hope she doesn't bring the cops with her this time. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. I didn't recognize the last number. Maybe it was one of Vera's friends. Maybe someone added for laughs. Either way, they were laughing at my expense. I should have felt hurt. Instead, I felt clear. They weren't even hiding it anymore. Clarice walked into the kitchen just as I was putting the phone down. She looked tired, like the house had sucked something out of her overnight. She poured herself a cup of coffee without a word and sat across from me. "You're up early," she said quietly. "I didn't sleep," I answered. Too much on my mind. She didn't ask what. We sipped in silence. Then I spoke. "I'm meeting with Mr. Green today." Her eyes flicked up. "He still answers your calls?" I looked straight at her. He always answered mine. She looked down again, then nodded once. Slowly. After breakfast, I gathered the documents, the forged transfer, Grandpa's note, the birthday card, and packed them in a folder. I didn't care if Vera thought I was making a scene. I wasn't interested in drama. I was interested in proof. As I zipped up my bag, the phone lit up again. New message, family group chat, from me. I typed, "I know what you tried to do. Stop now, or I won't." It didn't take long for Vera to reply. Try me." I stared at the screen, then typed 3 words. "You won't like the proof I'm bringing." I hit send, and for the first time in days, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about Grandpa anymore. This was about the years I'd spent letting people talk over me, diminish me, erase me. This was about every time I'd swallowed my voice for the sake of keeping peace in a family that only knew silence when it served them. They'd underestimated me. That was their first mistake. After I sent that last message, I didn't sleep. I tried. God, I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vera's face, heard her voice in that sneering tone she'd perfected over the years. Try me. Like she thought I was still the girl she could corner at Thanksgiving and shame into silence. That girl was long gone. Sometime just before dawn, I dozed off on the couch with the TV on low. The local news flickered across the screen. Weather warnings, traffic delays, a missing cat. I wasn't really listening. At 6:22 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I expected another jab from Vera. I didn't expect what I saw, a text from an unknown number. "If he dies, it's easier. You know that. You were never meant to come back." That was it. No punctuation, no name. Before I could screenshot, the message vanished. Auto-delete. But I had quick hands. I'd already caught it. I saved the image and immediately forwarded it to a backup email. If anything happened to Grandpa now, no one would be able to say I hadn't warned them. My heart thudded in my ears. I stood, paced the kitchen, Phone clenched tight. Then I called the carrier, reported the number. The woman on the line was calm, polite, but firm. That appears to have come from a prepaid burner SIM, likely untraceable. Perfect. I added that message to the file I'd started compiling on my laptop. Screenshots, photos of the forged document, voice memos, Grandpa's handwritten note. Every piece of evidence went into a single folder, labeled Raymond, Truth. Clarice entered the kitchen an hour later, her eyes still puffy, hair tied back like she'd barely slept. She poured herself coffee in silence. I didn't mention the text. Not yet. Instead, I said, "I'm driving to Seattle this afternoon. Green agreed to meet." She nodded without looking up. "You're going to blow all this wide open, aren't you?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "Whatever comes from that, I can live with." She sat at the table but said nothing more. Later that morning, I packed everything, documents, phone backups, the folder, and left it by the front door. Around noon, I stepped outside to get some air. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, like the sky hadn't made up its mind. I was halfway down the porch steps when I heard a car door slam. Vera. I didn't have to see her face to know her mood. Her heels hit the gravel like she meant to shatter it. She didn't knock, just walked right in, as if it were still her kingdom. "You got a minute?" she said. "No," I replied, not moving. She kept going, brushing past me into the kitchen, tossing her purse onto the counter like we were about to discuss holiday plans instead of elder neglect and forgery. "Let's talk," she said. "You want to talk now?" I raised an eyebrow. "After the messages? After the signature you tried to pass off as his?" Vera rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Azra. That's what this is about. Paperwork? You tried to transfer the house without his consent. It was his idea," she snapped. "He just didn't get around to finishing it." "He told you no," I said. "You forged his name anyway." She laughed, short and bitter. "You don't know anything. You were gone. You made sure I stayed gone. You think you're the only one who loves him?" she barked. "You left. We stayed. We dealt with the doctors, the bills, the mood swings. You think you can just show up and play savior? I think I'm the only one who didn't walk over him when he was calling for help." That silenced her for half a second. Then she stepped closer, voice low. "You don't know how this works. If you drag this through the mud, the whole family breaks." I looked her straight in the eye, then let it. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Clarice, who'd been standing quietly in the hallway, stepped into view. "Enough," she said. Vera turned to her. "You're letting her do this?" Clarice didn't blink. "I'm tired of keeping quiet." Something in Vera's posture stiffened. She reached for a coffee mug on the counter and, without warning, hurled it at the wall. It exploded into pieces next to the fridge. I didn't flinch. "That's the last thing you'll throw without consequence," I said calmly. She pointed at me, trembling. "You think you're so righteous? You think Green will believe you over me?" "I don't need him to believe me. I have proof." She snatched her purse and stormed out without another word. Clarice and I stood in silence as the sound of her tires tore down the gravel drive. By mid-afternoon, I was on I-5 heading toward Seattle. The rain had started again, steady, but not hard, just enough to blur the view and make you second-guess the distance between you and the rest of the world. Mr. Green's office was tucked above a quiet row of law firms near Pike Place. When I arrived, he was waiting in the conference room, glasses perched low on his nose, a half-read legal pad in front of him. "Azra," he said warmly, motioning for me to sit. I opened the folder, laid out every piece, the fake signature, the voicemail, the birthday card, Grandpa's note. He reviewed them slowly, his brows knitting tighter with each page. When he finished, he looked at me. "Your grandfather trusted you, more than you know. He always kept you listed as a backup. I think maybe you were his only real plan." I swallowed hard. "Is there another document?" He tapped the table once, twice. "There might be." His tone told me what his words didn't. If there was another will, one Vera didn't know about, This was about to get a lot messier. I left the office feeling more grounded than I had in days. It wasn't just about Grandpa anymore. It was about what they thought they could still get away with. By the time I made it back to Tacoma, the sky had shifted into that dusky gold that made everything look softer than it really was. Don't let the light fool you. Nothing about this day was gentle. Mr. Green had given me the envelope before I left his office. He didn't say much when he handed it over, just that it had been sitting in his safe for 3 months, at Grandpa's specific request. He said he didn't trust the energy in that house anymore, Green told me. Said he wanted to make sure you got what was already yours. Now, sitting in the living room with Clarice pacing behind me, I opened that envelope in front of everyone, Vera, my mother, 2 of my cousins, and Mrs. Bell, who insisted on coming when I told her I needed someone from the outside. The updated will was simple, clear, and notarized, dated 3 months prior. It left the house, the savings account, and full medical decision authority to me. No conditions, no questions. Vera was the last to arrive. She walked in with that stiff smile that never reached her eyes. "You seriously called a meeting?" she said, tossing her purse on the couch. "What are we, 12? "No," I said, "but it seems I have to spell things out like we are." Clarice stood behind me, her face unreadable. My cousins shifted awkwardly on the edge of their chairs. I held up the will. "This is from Grandpa, dated and notarized. It names me as his primary heir and guardian. It overrides everything else." Vera crossed her arms. "That's convenient." Mr. Green cleared his throat from the side of the room. "I can verify the signature and the date." He was completely competent when he made this decision, and very clear about who he did and didn't trust. A beat of silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Vera broke it with a laugh. "Oh, come on! You really think this isn't a setup? He was old. He got confused, probably thought she was still that little girl who used to bring him tea in her plastic cups." My voice didn't rise. "Or maybe he remembered exactly who was there when he needed someone, Mrs. Bell, who'd been quietly sipping tea near the window, set her cup down with more force than necessary. "I heard him," she said softly. Everyone turned. "What?" Vera asked. "I heard your grandfather that day," Mrs. Bell repeated. "Through the window. He was calling for help." "You're mistaken," Vera snapped. "I knocked," Mrs. Bell continued. "You opened the door. You told me it was the TV, that Raymond was resting." The room froze. Vera's lips parted, but no sound came out. I turned to her. "You didn't just abandon him. You shut out the people who tried to help." Vera's composure cracked like glass under heat. "He was slipping, okay? He was confused half the time, couldn't remember what year it was. We were doing the best we could." "No," Clarice said suddenly. Her voice trembled, but it rang louder than I'd heard it in years. "You told me he was fine. You said you checked on him." Vera spun to face her. "Oh, now you're on her side?" Clarice stepped forward. "I should have listened to my instincts, but I was tired, I was scared. And you," she pointed at Vera, "you made it sound like it would be worse to interfere." "He was dying anyway," Vera shouted. "What's the point of dragging this through the mud?" "The point," I said, standing slowly, "is that he was alive, and he deserved better than to be left on the floor for hours while everyone pretended nothing was wrong." "You just want to look like the hero," Vera snarled. "Like always. Swoop in, collect the praise, act like you're better than everyone else." "I don't care how I look," I said. "This doesn't give me power. It just confirms what Grandpa already knew. I was still his." She stared at me, breath ragged, hands clenched. And then her phone rang. She glanced down. Caller ID, local sheriff's department. The blood drained from her face. Clarice's hand went to her mouth. My cousins exchanged worried glances. Mrs. Bell raised her eyebrows, but said nothing. Vera silenced the call and looked at me with a rage I hadn't seen since we were kids fighting over the last word at the dinner table. "You called the cops on me?" "No," I said. "I submitted evidence." She stepped forward, but Clarice blocked her path. "I told you," Clarice said gently. "Enough." Vera's jaw tightened, her gaze darting between us, but she said nothing more. just turned, grabbed her purse, and stormed out the door. I didn't follow. The room stayed quiet for a few long beats. Then Mr. Green gathered the documents, gave me a nod, and said he'd be in touch. Clarice sat down, hands folded, her eyes were glassy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. But I sat beside her anyway. The truth had finally stepped in, and now the law was knocking too. The house hadn't moved, not an inch, but everything inside it felt shifted, like the center of gravity had finally pulled itself back to where it belonged. Clarice had gone quiet again, staring into her teacup like it might offer her a path out of guilt. Mrs. Bell stood in the corner with her purse still clutched to her side, uncertain whether to sit or leave. And Vera hadn't said a word since the deputy's call. We were still in that breathless pause when I reached into my coat pocket. "There's one more thing," I said. The room turned to me like I was holding a lit fuse, which I was. I pulled out my phone, the old one, the one I hadn't used in months, and tapped through the gallery until I found the video. A 2-minute clip, grainy but clear, from exactly 2 months ago. I'd taken it when I stopped by unexpectedly, the last time I'd visited without asking permission. "Before you say anything," I added, "just watch." I turned the screen toward the group and hit play. The video opened on a garden bathed in late summer light. Grandpa sat on the bench he'd built with his own hands back in '92. Beside him, little Emma Bell, Mrs. Bell's granddaughter, held a juice box in one hand and a half-eaten cookie in the other. Grandpa's voice came through the audio, soft but steady. "Only one remembered my birthday this year, Azra, not the others. She sees me, not just what I have." I didn't speak. Neither did anyone else. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Clarice gasped. Vera blinked like someone had tossed sand in her eyes. Even Mrs. Bell's eyebrows lifted with a restrained kind of pride. The screen went dark. "I didn't mean to forget," Vera said finally, but the words barely made it past her lips. "He was slipping. I didn't think it mattered anymore." I turned to her, not angry, just tired. "It always matters," I said. "Even when they can't speak, they still feel. And even when they fade, they remember who showed up." Her jaw trembled, but no words followed. Then the door creaked. Mr. Green stepped back into the room. Behind him, a uniformed deputy nodded once, his hands resting firmly on his belt. "Miss Alcott," he said. Vera stiffened. "This is a formal notice. We've opened an investigation into possible elder neglect and endangerment. You are not being charged at this time, but you are expected to cooperate fully with our inquiry." She snatched the paper from his hand like it might burn her fingers. "This is ridiculous," she said, turning toward me. "You've always wanted to ruin me." I didn't blink. "No, I wanted to protect him. Everything else is a consequence." She opened her mouth, but Clarice stood. "Don't," my mother said, her voice low. "Just don't." The deputy and Mr. Green left soon after, leaving behind silence that wasn't quite peaceful, but certainly more honest than before. Vera walked to the door and paused. She looked back, just once, and then left, heels clicking against the hardwood with defiance that didn't sound like power anymore. Mrs. Bell followed, after a soft squeeze of my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That left just me and Clarice. She hadn't moved from where she stood. "I let her talk me out of standing up," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Every time I thought about doing something, I heard her voice in my head. Not yours, hers. I didn't speak." "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough," she added, voice nearly lost to the room. I sighed, then sat. "It's too late for fixing what happened," I said, not out of cruelty, but because it was true. "But maybe not too late to stop it from happening again." She nodded. It wasn't peace, but it was something that might lead there someday. Later that evening, after the house had settled and Clarice had gone to lie down, I stepped out into the garden. It had started to drizzle again, light, rhythmic, not enough to drive me back inside. I found my way to the bench, the one from the video. It was damp, the wood cool against my jeans. The backyard smelled of mint and wet soil. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain fall through the dimming light, listening to wind push through branches like tired breath. "I hope you knew I came back," I said quietly. "I never stopped being yours." And then, because part of me couldn't not do it, I reached into my coat one more time. Another envelope. This one older, yellowed at the edges, with faint ink that read, "To be read after I'm gone." I stared at it for a long time before I dared to open it. The envelope crinkled softly in my hands as I broke the seal, its edges worn, the paper brittle with time, and something else, weight. Outside, the rain had started again, a gentle tapping against the window pane, like fingers too timid to knock. Droplets had dotted the corners of the envelope, bleeding slightly into the grain, softening the sharpness of its arrival. I didn't open it right away. I stood there in the entryway of the hospital, coat still damp, heart pacing a rhythm it hadn't settled into since they first called me. There was something sacred about the moment before opening it, when anything was still possible. Hope and sorrow sat side by side, and I wasn't ready to choose one yet. But eventually, my fingers did what my mind could not. Inside was a single page. The handwriting, unmistakably his, wavered in places like the ink was dragging his pulse across the page. I could see where his grip had slipped, where his strength had dipped. Some lines paused halfway through, others carried a smudge, and a few had grown faint, watered down not by rain, but by something more intimate. Emotion, maybe, or memory. It began simply, "If she comes back," I swallowed. "Tell her I never stopped believing her heart was the best of us all." That's where it ended. No flourish. No sign-off. Just a sudden line trailing into a curve, then a thick blot of ink, as if the pen had lingered longer than his hand could bear. A silence louder than words. He hadn't finished it. Or maybe that was his finish, a gesture incomplete only by convention, but perfectly whole in meaning. No goodbye, no signature, just faith, just trust, just him. I folded the letter with careful fingers and pressed it gently against my chest. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just held it there, over my heart, like something fragile might steady something broken. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. He hadn't stirred. The nurses said he hadn't moved once during the night. Stillness, they called it. But not absence. Not yet. I sat beside him, the pages still folded in my pocket. My voice came low, low enough to almost stay secret, but I needed to say it out loud. "I read it," I whispered. "You didn't need to finish it." I reached for his hand. It felt cool beneath my fingers, but familiar, like something I'd known before I had words for knowing. I didn't expect him to squeeze back. I didn't need him to. I just wanted him to know someone was still there, someone still listening. "You were the only one who ever saw me," I said. "Even when I tried to make myself invisible, even when I thought disappearing would hurt less than staying." The machines hummed softly. The monitors blinked in rhythmic green. Outside the door, life continued with a kind of sterile urgency. Doctors paging one another, carts squeaking along tile. But in that room, there was only quiet. A different kind of quiet. Not hollow, not lost. Just peace. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house. The air inside still smelled like him. Wool sweaters, cedar drawers, and the faintest trace of pipe tobacco, long since abandoned, but never quite gone. The house held its breath like it had been waiting for me to return. Like it wasn't sure if it should start letting go. I wasn't sure either. I wandered into the closet in Grandpa's room. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I hadn't found it yet. Near the back, beneath a neat stack of old flannel shirts, I found it. A small wooden box. Hand-carved, the wood smooth, worn by time and touch, etched into the top in shaky letters. For Azra, the only one who sat with me when I had nothing to say. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, the box balanced in my lap like something holy. Inside, tied with twine, was a worn leather notebook. I recognized it immediately. Every page inside was something I'd written when I was younger. Scraps of poems, stories, notes I'd left for him on the kitchen table. Little fragments of thought I hadn't known he kept, but he hadn't just kept them. He'd read them, really read them. Beneath each entry in his careful script were his thoughts, not critiques, not edits, just feelings, reactions, reflections. Once, after a poem I wrote about feeling invisible, he'd simply written, "You are more seen than you know." I traced the words with shaking fingers. "You kept me," I whispered. That afternoon, Clarice came by. She didn't say much, just brought a thermos of tea and 2 thick slices of lemon loaf wrapped in wax paper. We sat in the kitchen, surrounded by quiet. She didn't mention Vera, I didn't either. We didn't need to. Instead, she reached across the table and took my hand, and held it. That was enough. The next day, Mrs. Bell stopped by. She didn't knock, just left a pie on the porch, wrapped in foil, with a note attached. "Some people repay love with control. You repaid it with care." I didn't touch the pie for days. It sat on the kitchen counter like a witness, like a closing argument. A week passed, then 2. Grandpa didn't wake again, but I was there when he left. They said it was peaceful, that his heart simply stopped, that his body, tired and ready, chose stillness. I believed them, not because I needed comfort, but because I'd seen it in his face already. The peace. It had begun days before he passed, when I came home and stopped hiding. He didn't need to say goodbye. He already had. A month later, I moved. Not far. Just far enough. Orcas Island became home. A coastal town with windswept streets, a harbor that glistened just enough, and a kind of quiet that felt like healing, not isolation. I rented a small cottage near the bluffs. Upstairs, I let out the space to a painter who smelled like turpentine and lavender and never asked questions. I work part-time at a local bookstore now, mostly in the poetry section. I shelve it like it's sacred. On my desk sits Grandpa's wooden box. I open it sometimes, not out of grief, not because I miss him, though I do, but out of gratitude. They took so much from me, my place, my name, my version of home, but I found what was mine. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by returning to who I was before they told me I wasn't enough. I'm not writing this for revenge, I'm writing it because truth doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it sits quietly in the garden, sometimes it saves your poems, sometimes it leaves a letter unfinished, not because there wasn't more to say, but because it had already been said in the way someone lived. And now I'm staying where I am seen. Finally, and fully. Some scars don't fade, but they do stop bleeding. Sometimes the loudest betrayals come wrapped in silence, covered by politeness, justified by family duty, and buried under years of avoidance. This story isn't just about inheritance or forgiveness. It's about choosing truth when silence is more convenient and choosing to be seen even after being erased. Have you ever been the only one who spoke up when everyone else stayed quiet? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found meaning in this story, don't forget to subscribe for more true feeling stories just like this.